We also have Marilyn Rosendahl, Katie Dadlis, and Spencer Johnson, who are planning staff, who will be assisting with the small group discussions tonight. I also want to thank Hamline Midway Coalition, Como Community Council, and North End Neighborhood Organization for co-hosting, and especially the note takers. We really, really appreciate you guys helping. All right. So again, here's the icebreaker polling activity. I'll have it on the next slide too here. So for tonight's schedule, we have an icebreaker polling activity and a brief presentation. And then we're going to be broken up into small groups for 2 rounds of discussions facilitated by a city staff member, and then large group report outs. And then we'll wrap up with how you can stay engaged on this study. So for the polling activity, we're doing something a little different. So if you'd like to participate, you can go to menti.com on your smartphone or computer and type in this code, and it'll show the presentation as I go through it, and it'll also prompt you to answer some questions. So as the presentation goes along, I'll ask you questions you can answer on that website, or if you'd like, you can also type your answers in the chat. So this is really just a fun icebreaker polling activity. So don't worry if you're not able to figure out this menti.com, you'll still be able to see the results in the presentation here. All right, so our first question here is, what neighborhood do you live in? And again, here's that code. If you're able to go to menti.com and using that code and entering in, and it'll prompt you to answer this question. All right, so right now we have a good amount of people from Como and Hamline Midway and Union Park. Have some people who do not live in St. Paul. Gonna wait for a few more others here. You can also type your answers in the chat too. Otherwise, go to this menti.com and use that code, and it'll help you participate in this polling activity here we have.
Hey everyone, this is Michael Wade with the City of St. Paul PED. I'm a colleague of Emma's. Did just want to note what you probably already observed. We are recording the larger group meeting tonight. Just wanted to verbally make sure that everyone knew about that. We won't be recording the small groups, but just so we can all go back and refresh ourselves on some of our notes that we bring up and insights in the larger group we are recording. And I believe one of the community councils will be holding that and handling that and sending it out to whoever wants to go back. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Michael, for that reminder. Yes, so we are being recorded just for these full group sections of the meeting here. All right, so I am seeing mostly Como and Hamline Midway and North End participants, which makes sense. That's what our meeting is targeted for. We also have some other people from Summit Hill and Union Park. So that's great. Thank you for attending. All right, let me move on to the next question here. Okay, so in 3 words or phrases, how would you describe the housing options in your neighborhood? So maybe there's like a dominant housing type, or potentially a good variety of housing types, or a certain style of home, or homes with certain characteristics that you see in the neighborhood that you live in. So these are the kind of things that we're looking for. Great. Some single family, diverse, expensive, working class, 2-story, more expensive, understandable. Single family, that's kind of coming up a lot. Limited availability, that makes sense. Some duplexes, apartments, student housing, some older housing stock. 2-story, older homes, changing, competitive, smaller homes, single family. So single family and apartments are kind of coming through as the main answers here. Some hidden duplexes, that's interesting. Yeah, you might not be able to notice those in your neighborhood, but they are out there. Right. 1920s, 1960s, transit accessible. All right, thank you. Thank you for sharing, just to help us get in the mindset. All right, so now this is just a fun sort of a quiz activity here. And these are to help you visualize the housing types that we're going to be talking about tonight. So the images in these examples are all housing that's in St. Paul. So we are asking how many housing units are in this building, 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, right now I'm seeing mostly 1. Some other people are thinking 2 or 3. The answer here is actually 3. So there are 3 homes in this building. So some of you were right. These can be a little tricky. Okay, move on to the next one here. So how many housing units are in this building? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Right, seeing a lot of people thinking that it's 4, but everyone's thinking different ideas. All right, so we're mostly thinking 2 or 4. The correct answer is actually 1. So this is a single-family home. It shows that there are different styles of housing that doesn't necessarily look like one housing type over another. They're kind of a little bit difficult to tell how many. All right, let's try this one here. 1, 2, 3, or 4. I think most people think it's 2. Followed by 1. People are thinking it might be 1. Right, and a couple other people think it's 3 or 4. Let's see. Correct answer is 2. This one is, there are 2 mailbox slots here. That's kind of a trick here, but this just shows that it can be difficult to tell what housing types are which, and they all kind of fit in with the neighborhood. So thanks for participating in that. All right, so why are we doing the 1 to 4 unit housing study? So here's a little background. The city's been experiencing low rental vacancy rates. Over the last few years, rates have been below or around 5%, which is regarded as full occupancy for a well-functioning rental market. There are large numbers of cost-burdened households, like in the 47% of renters who are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. The Metropolitan Council is projecting an increase of almost 13,000 households by 2040. So we're studying how we can help accommodate that growth. The city also wants to accommodate the diverse needs of residents by supporting expanded housing choices and taking steps towards addressing the housing shortage. And finally, the city wants to implement policies from the 2040 Comprehensive Plan and City Council Resolution 18-1204, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So what's the policy direction for this study? The study is called for by a 2018 City Council resolution, which calls to create and preserve housing that's affordable at all income levels, and specifically called for a zoning study to explore allowing more multi-unit buildings along transit routes and in neighborhood nodes in single-family zoning districts. And then from the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, we have policies that we are looking at implementing through the study. The comp plan land use policies we have on the screen here. They call for transit supportive density, focused growth, and neighborhood nodes. And these are our areas throughout the city that are planned for higher density mixed use development. And then there are housing policies like H48 and H49 here that call for expanded housing types like duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes to allow for broadened housing choices in the city's urban neighborhoods. And they also tell us to consider amendments to permit small single-family homes and duplexes, to permit development types like pocket neighborhoods and cottage communities. All right, so what's the household and housing context? So who are we? The pie chart shows a breakdown of the household types. One-person households are the most prevalent housing type, followed by two-person households. So one and two-person households make up almost 64% of the total number of households. And in the region, in 2020 through 2040, Metropolitan Council is projecting that one-person households will grow at the fastest rate by 26%, while two and three-person households are projected to grow by 13%. Same with four-plus person households. So Metropolitan Council is projecting the greatest growth to happen for one-person households. The percent of households with at least one person under 18, this has increased a little from 30.1% in 2010 to 31.1% in 2019. The percent of households with at least one person over 60, this has increased more substantially from 22.8% in 2010 to 30.2% in 2019. So we're seeing greater increase, around 7% over the last 10 years. Households with four or more people, this has increased slightly since 2010. There's a new trend since 2010, which is a rise in extended family and multi-generational living arrangements, and an increase in doubling up in households. So this is a new trend. And this is partially contributed to declining household affordability and continued wage stagnation for moderate and low-income households. So what are the housing options we have today? So this bar chart shows the number of housing units by housing type in 2000 and 2017. So one unit detached and attached homes, these have increased, and the greatest growth has been for units in apartment buildings with 20 or more units. The 2 to 4 unit housing types and 5 to 19 unit housing types, these are disappearing from our housing stock. These are decreasing. In terms of the most prevalent housing type in St. Paul, 50% of housing units are in single family detached, and this reflects the current emphasis in our zoning code on single family homes. Units in buildings with 20 or more units make up 31% of the city's housing units. In small scale multifamily, duplexes and triplexes and fourplexes, these are only holding 11% of the city's housing units. So overall, this shows that there is a mismatch in the household types and housing types that are available. So, while we have almost 64% of households are one and two person households, most of the options that are available to them are in larger firm buildings or single family homes that they may not want to maintain or be able to afford. All right, so what is a study evaluating the zoning code? So this is a zoning study. We divided it into two different phases. Phase 1 was recently passed by the City Council last month, and these amendments focus on allowing smaller homes, multiple residential buildings per lot, provided that they meet certain lot requirements, and removing barriers to the construction of accessory dwelling units or ADUs. Phase 2, this is the phase that we're in currently. It's broader in scope, and it includes reviewing changes to the zoning code that will allow for more flexibility and supporting greater housing diversity. So specifically, we are evaluating amendments to the zoning code in order to allow greater diversity of single-family developments, such as townhomes and twin homes, cluster developments, and allowing duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in more places that are currently permitted. We're also evaluating changing the dimensional standards and other zoning requirements to facilitate this greater range of housing options. And we're also evaluating affordable housing incentives and exploring amendments to the requirements for cluster developments and accessory dwelling units to support greater flexibility of use. So we're currently in the technical analysis and community engagement stage of this zoning study. This engagement session tonight is an opportunity for you all to provide input that will inform the proposed zoning code text amendments for phase 2 of this study. All right, so what is neighborhood scale housing? So the small group discussions, these will involve a concept of neighborhood scale housing. And this includes the housing types that are being evaluated in the 1 to 4 unit housing study. So single family detached, these are the standard 1 unit detached single family home that are most prevalent in our housing stock. Single family attached homes, these are 1 unit dwellings that are individually owned, attached to 1 or more 1 unit dwellings by sharing a common wall or walls. These are typically called townhomes or twin homes if there's just 2 attached. Duplexes are 2 unit dwellings, triplexes 3 unit dwellings, fourplexes 4 unit dwellings, and cluster or cottage developments. These are a group of smaller 1 unit dwellings that are detached but arranged around a shared courtyard or green space. And these are not very prevalent in St. Paul. This image right here, this is an example from Minneapolis. There are some local examples, but not many in St. Paul. And accessory dwelling units, these are, or ADUs, these are secondary units that are subordinate to a principal single family dwelling. And these can be within the principal dwelling, or they can be attached or detached on the same lot. So what all of these have in common is that they are generally compatible in scale with single family neighborhoods. Many of them exist in the city's neighborhoods already. And they are generally 1 to 3 stories, and they can be rented or owned.
Oh, thank you, Kitty.
All right, we have one more icebreaker question here for you. So of the housing types listed below, check all that you've lived in. And so we're looking for all that you've lived in during your entire life. All right, so far we're seeing mostly single family detached and apartment buildings with 5 or more units. Also seeing that everyone has lived, at least one person has lived in each of these types. Seeing a lot of duplexes, ADUs, and someone has lived in a cluster development. So that's some great information to share in your breakout discussions. So this really does match what I showed earlier about the available housing types, with single family detached and apartments with 5 more units really being the most prevalent and growing housing types that we have in the city right now. Thanks for participating in that. All right, so now we will be going into our small group discussions. So you'll be placed in a room with other participants, a city staff facilitator, and a note taker. And we'll have 20 minutes to discuss either topic 1 or 2. Your facilitator will help you out with what topic we're talking about. Then we'll be brought back into the full group for report outs. And during this part, we hope that the note takers will be able to share what you talked about in your group. And then following that, we'll be beginning round 2 of discussion. And this is where you'll be talking about either topic 3 or one of topic 4 questions. And then we'll do another group report out. So with that, Sarah, are you able to put us into our small groups?
Here you go. Have fun.
Thanks. All right, so I think, do we have everybody back here in our large group? I think so. All right, well, hopefully everyone had a good discussion. So now I'm gonna have each group share a few main points. We have about 5 to 7 minutes here. So I'm going to start with the group that talked about topic 1, which is about housing types and households. So the group 2 note taker, would you be able to share what your group talked about in a minute or so?
Is that our group? I don't know which group I was in. I think I was in
Yeah, we're
two.
in two. Yes,
Okay.
Maggie.
Okay. Yeah. So we talked about, so in topic one, we spent some time talking about the housing type, like what factors were important to people when they were choosing where they lived. And I think a lot of that was summed up in this idea of being able to choose the right size for your lifestyle at that point in time. Right. And so knowing that people kind of change throughout their life and different housing suits different periods of your life. So kind of people struggled to find things that were, you know, both close to their work and right sized for their lifestyle. The other thing that we talked about here was the idea of what is actually affordable and what's practical, like what's relatively affordable and what's practically affordable. And while we might have things that fall within that, you know, affordable housing, when we're talking about single rooms, you know, or one person living places that are still over $1,000 a month, that's practically often not affordable. We also talked about which households would benefit from additional neighborhood scaling. And we think that this really is, again, those people in kind of the 1 to 2 person households, maybe people in the younger demographic, folks who aren't necessarily looking for those single family homes that we seem to have so many of in St. Paul. Yeah, lack of, that's what I said, what neighborhood scale housing types are missing? And we just said lack of non-single family homes. And then for the second topic, so we did both, but so I'm just going to barrel through. On the second topic, the main answer when we said what should the city do to add more housing was why can't we do all of these things? So the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, why can't we have a mix of all of them? But there was specific interest in converting existing homes into small scale multifamily. Someone pointed out that when we do that, we often have landlords who live on site, and that provides, you know, both kind of good experiences for the renters and good experiences for the rentees on both sides when you have landlords who are very close by. And that it also uses existing spaces, which I think if the city strives for sustainability and environmental, you know, consciousness, then that fits in there too.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Maggie. All right, I'm going to have group 5, and that was Katie's group. If that note taker would be able to share just a couple main points of what you talked about in your group.
Yeah, sure. Transit and bike commuting and walkability were things that definitely came up, even if you're not necessarily immediately on the transit line, at least close enough to it to access it easily. Also, having some sort of yard or green space or a place to grow plants, even if it's just very small, it, you know, kind of builds a little bit of a connection with your own home. And to what household types would benefit from additional neighborhood scale housing and what types are missing, the discussions kind of blended together there. There is a lot of agreement that things like single family attached homes and duplexes could target multiple markets of people, young people entering the housing market, as well as maybe seniors downsizing would both benefit from more of those sorts of housing. And ADUs, they're expensive to build. If they're somehow more affordable, I think more people would do it. And I think Maggie said the same thing. Basically, all of the multifamily housing options are underrepresented. So that's what we went through.
Great. Thank you so much, Chad. All right, I'm going to skip to a group that talked about topic 2, just because we're running a little bit past here. So let's see, group 3, which is Michael's group. If you guys talked about group 2, could the note taker they talked about topic 2. Would you be able to talk about what you talked about for your group?
Yes, I think I was in Michael's group. So we had a variety of people, or all of us were from different neighborhoods, which I thought was kind of interesting. And all of us seemed to have experience in our neighborhoods of most of the types of housing on the topic 2 slide, with the kind of undertone that none of it adversely harms the character of the neighborhood, and we'd like to see as much of things like that as possible. One point that was interesting, one of our group had a background in affordable housing development and spoke a little bit of the city changing or downzoning large swaths of land at some point in the past. We didn't really get to drill into that, but I thought that was interesting because it kind of speaks to a policy choice at one point to get to where we are, and now we're trying to maybe undo that a little bit. We had one member of the group who was from a neighborhood with a lot of vacant lots, and has experience of them being vacant for long periods of time, or the entire time she's lived in the neighborhood. And that kind of triggered some conversation about, maybe there's a role for the city to look at vacant lots more systematically, not as individual, hey, we got to build one house on these, but maybe we can find a developer to build a house on 400 different vacant lots, and get some economies of scale as we talk about construction is expensive. And then there was a lot of talk about flexibility. You could have a very large single family house on a small lot, and it fits in the neighborhood less well than maybe a more thoughtfully designed multifamily housing unit. And so the zoning code should be able to be adaptable to situations like that. And then the last point was we shouldn't dismiss manufactured housing or modular construction, it being a wave of the future and a lot of possibilities there for the ability for people to build more cheaply as some of these other potential modifications to the zoning code allow more flexibility for what they can build.
Great. Thank you so much, Nathan, for sharing that. All right, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to take someone from Josh's group, the note taker, who talked about topic 2. This was room 4. Able to share what you talked about maybe in a quick 30 seconds?
Yes. Kind of piggybacking off of Nate's points about flexibility, we talked about how more flexibility, the better, in order to try to find many different ways to increase density. We talked about how parking is sort of a recurring issue as things stand right now. So also encouraging like a concurrent rise in public transportation options. And then some talk about how their neighborhoods, specifically like Como and Hamline Midway, have existing triplexes and duplexes that kind of came before the 1970s code change. So there already is some experience with that type of housing, and it seems to be something that is beneficial. And then the last thing that we touched on was how in this slide, one of the things that's not included is the recent change in the definition of family to make a single family have a larger number of people. And so that can sort of lend itself to something like a rooming house or just renting out individual bedrooms in a house, which someone mentioned in our group that's something Minneapolis is looking at as well. So we've discussed that idea as well.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Alec, and thanks for everyone and the note takers especially. Thank you. All right, Sarah, I think we're ready to be put back in our breakout rooms for round 2.
Okay, I mixed it up. I hope that's okay. Have fun.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I accidentally clicked out of it. Oh. No, that's all right. It was my fault.
Did you know that February?
All right, I think we're all back here as a full group. So now we are going to do round 2 of report outs. So I'm going to, have each group share the main points of what you talked about, and we have about 10 minutes here, so we have a little bit more time. So I'm going to start with my group. So Carrie, are you able to share what our group talked about for topic 3?
Our group really discussed about kind of like if you're going to do some new development and you're going to put larger scale housing, like duplexes or triplexes or even fourplex is where they would go. And part of the thought was when you talk about the streets and the type of streets the neighborhood nodes, that would possibly be a good spot, would be like on the corners of those areas. And then talking also a lot about vacant lots and how to subdivide the large double lots to allow additional housing in those. And then one comment was really kind of cool is to redefine the high frequency transit lines, because there's really still good transit in some locations that aren't considered that. So you don't really have to live right on the transit route to be considered a transit neighborhood. One of our participants actually lived like 2 blocks away from transit, and she considers herself a high transit user. So maybe rethinking some of how the city is thinking about that. And then the concern that if we're replacing home, ownership with single family and the developers coming in and doing that and allowing some sort of classes or support or grants to be able to have homeowners actually take their own larger house and put it into a fourplex, so they're not like leaving the neighborhood. So finding funding streams and design ideas to do that. And then we got actually to having sort of a preservation requirement when you're going to demolish homes to be able to salvage some items and have a requirement there. And we did get to the cluster developments, and everyone seems to really like the idea, but the issue could be is where would you get that much land in the city that's developed as this? So Emma, did you have anything to add? Did I miss anything?
No, I thought that was a great summary. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
All right, and so I'll do one more group that talked about topic 3, which was about the opportunities for more housing. So let's see, Michael's group, which is group 3. The note taker, are you able to share what you talked about in a minute or so?
Yeah, we covered a fair amount of ground. I think the specific question about where this type of development might be appropriate. I think the major streets were seemingly less attractive in our group versus maybe what we could call more interior streets, where this kind of housing, as we all can see in our own neighborhoods, with many examples of duplexes and triplexes that are in the existing neighborhoods, fit in well. And then we talked actually a little bit about corner lots and how there might be a special opportunity for a single family corner lot house to take advantage of street frontage that currently exists and might be underutilized. Maybe there's a different class of property for the corner lots where there might be some more opportunities there versus a lot without a street corner. And then we also talked a little bit about multi-generational families and larger families, kind of with the conversation of flexibility more generally, where not every family conforms to kind of 2 parents and 2 kids or anything like that, and so offering that flexibility is something that adds value to the neighborhood that it's in.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Nathan. All right, so the other groups had a different topic 4. So topic 4A, this is about development considerations for new construction housing types. So group 2, which is Maryland's group, are you able to share what your group talked about in a few main points?
Hi, yeah, we didn't have a note taker in our group, and I took some notes, so I'll give it a shot. We went over the lot characteristics in the neighborhood type where it's alley served versus those that are not alley served, and what that means for opportunity or loss thereof for ingress and egress through the alley and off-street parking there. And we went through, the fact that the corner lots might have different opportunities with the dual frontage for some possibly townhome or duplex, that would make sense. The exhibits that we were looking at didn't show, there was a note that there's no parcel size here that would allow us to do a cluster development. I had posed the question about whether or not in a cluster development scenario, that there might be some shared common space with a central kind of courtyard entrance. And if the cluster development where all the entrances face each other in this common public realm entrance, does it matter if we lose the more individual feel of a backyard or a side yard in a cluster development? Does that matter? And so there was some discussion about green space and that, the role of parks and the proximity to other parks, and whether or not, since we need to provide the diversity of the housing options, we should consider housing units of all types that don't necessarily have their own green space or backyard associated with it. So that was an interesting comment that came out of the group. And we did talk again about parking. And there was some comments about making sure that our urban tree canopy is preserved in our thought processes as well. So I think that summarizes some of it.
Great, thanks, Marilyn. All right, so then topic 4B, this is about development considerations for conversion. So single family homes that could be converted into smaller multifamily properties. So group 5, which is Katie's group, would the note taker be able to share what your group talked about in a few sentences?
Yeah, sure can. I think what became really apparent in this conversation is that it's really hard to come up with a blanket policy that impacts the entire city when we've got so many different neighborhoods with different characteristics and different densities, just different designs existing. One thing that did come up was targeting policies that encourage ADUs to existing houses that you would have a difficult time adding internal units to. So we're talking like 1.5-story bungalows. It's harder to turn that into a multi-unit building than, say, a 2- or 3-story building house, which could easily house additional units. We talked a little bit about alley access that, again, really depends on the neighborhood. If you have an area with ample street parking, that doesn't matter so much, but if you need the off-street parking, that could be an issue. Different neighborhoods have different transit accessibility. That factors into that too. We talked a little bit about yards at the end of it before we ran out of time. Side yards didn't seem to matter too much, just because there are so many single-family homes, depending on the neighborhood, that have minimal side yard spacing already. It's the front yard and the backyard that matters. That's what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Chad. All right, then the last topic here, topic 4C. So this one was about building or site plan design elements that could be encouraged or mandated. Will our group 6, which was Spencer's group, will the note taker share what you talked about in your group?
Unfortunately, they got me. It's Sarah O'Brien. So I was trying to multitask, but really in regards to design elements, some of the conversation was around the building frontage. And so ensuring that there are windows, important to know that no one wants to see a garage in the front of the home. You see this often where there's not an alley. And a shared driveway is not the best situation. The alleys have a lot of advantages. And then the term human scale, which was new to me, came up. And that really means having a front door and windows, something visually appealing instead of a blank wall, and really just an entry with interest. And I guess the comment was also made to ensure that too many opinions doesn't hinder things getting built. And I think that's about it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Sarah. All right, we have a little bit more time, so I'm just going to go back to group 4, and this was Josh's group. If you want to quickly share what you talked about going back to topic 3.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the neighborhood nodes, and one of the points that was brought up was that the different multifamily housing options should be made available throughout the city and not just in the neighborhood nodes. Although those are good places to focus on density, it shouldn't be like exclusively in those areas. And then just some of like the natural limitations of certain properties. So making more options available so that different property owners can choose the option to increase density that matches with their circumstances. And then there were some questions about, or some talk about vacant properties or vacant lots and just ways to incentivize construction in those areas, because it was noted that those can often sit vacant for too long, and maybe there's a lack of awareness around what options there are to develop in certain areas. So, and then a general comment around just whenever these decisions are made or when the policy is rolled out, making sure that there's a lot of information flowing from the city to the residents, making everyone aware of what these different options are, how they can access them, just more around that information aspect.
Great, thank you. Those are great points. All right, thank you everyone for sharing, doing that report out. Just have one more slide, and then we'll get you guys out of here early. So this is our timeline and the next step. So we have engagement activities and technical analysis. This is going to be happening through this spring. We have a project website, which is the stpaul.gov website that has our FAQs on there, some more detailed memos and kind of the more technical aspects of the study for you to take a look at. And then we have this Engage St. Paul engagement website, and that has more information about what you talked about today, has some good info sheets and some opportunities to provide more input. We have a survey on there, so we encourage you to take that survey and share that with others. We have some other activities on there for you to do to provide input. So check that website out. We also have our text memo drafting. This is happening this spring through summer. Then the Planning Commission and City Council process. This includes 2 public hearings, one for Planning Commission and one for City Council. That is projected to be this fall and winter. And if you have any questions, this is our project website here. And these websites have a lot of good information. If you want to reach out to me, my information is on there too. So thank you everyone for coming and all the great conversation. We really appreciate all the great feedback. And thanks to our note takers. We appreciate that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.